review. This week we've got the XT100 and I am flying solo because my esteemed colleague Benjamin is on vacay. So let's see how we get through this. Show me your world. That's the tagline for the new Fujifilm XT100, and at first glance and handling, it definitely seems up to the task. The XT100 fits in between the XA5 and the XT20. Somewhere in the middle there, and it'll be a viable competitor for cameras like the Sony a6000, the Olympus EPL9, Canon M50, etc., etc. Here are the standout features that Fujifilm wants you to know about this camera. It has a 24.2 APS-C sensor, a 3-way tiltable touchscreen LCD. It's got a high-resolution EVF, Bluetooth connectivity, 11 different film simulation modes, 17 different filter modes. It has the classic Fujifilm styling and sort of textured grip. And it also has a remarkably long battery life. It'll give you 430 shots on one charge, or something like 100 minutes full HD recording. The kit version of this camera comes with the XC 15 to 45mm lens, variable aperture, f3.5 to 5.6, OIS PZ. That's the same lens that comes on the XA5. It also has the same sensor that comes on the XA5, which is a Bayer filter sensor rather than the X-Trans filters that you commonly find on Fujifilm X models. The lens is plastic in construction, has an electronic sort of power zoom mechanic on it, which when shooting anything is quite noisy. So I'll be interested to see how that affects video, if the camera is going to pick up that noise, even if you're using another mic on there while you're zooming in and out. So if that's going to affect vlogging or something, I'm not entirely sure. The minimum focus distance, however, is only a couple inches away from the front of the camera. I shot some macro photos yesterday, or at least some very close-up photos of some flowers while I was out and about testing the camera in Cheltenham. And sure enough, I could hold the camera right up to the flower and get a nice clean shot out of it. So with this 35mm equivalent, I think is 23 to 68mm. So you got a variety of shooting options straight out of the box. It's worth mentioning that this camera and that lens, it has the X mount, so you are not limited as you might be with something like the M50 to the Canon M lenses. The door's wide open, so you can already use a full range of Fujifilm X mount lenses. So when you're ready to upgrade, you don't need to consider getting an adapter. Another interesting feature of this camera is it will shoot 1080p video at up to 60 frames a second. So in combination with the 3-way tilting LCD screen and the mic jack, that puts it in sort of contention as a viable content creator's tool or vlogger's camera. One thing though that you'll need to be aware of about the camera is the mic jack is a 2.5mm mic jack. So if you do purchase this camera and you intend to use an external microphone on it, you will need to purchase an adapter, but they're relatively inexpensive. It does shoot 4K, and I imagine this will be, I don't know, I'm sure this is going to show up in the comment section somewhere. The camera shoots 4K, but it shoots 4K at only 15 frames a second, which renders it relatively useless for things like content creation, well, video creation anyway, but still useful for things like time lapses. The camera shoots roughly 6 frames a second, and you'll get about 26 frames before the buffer runs out. If you're happy to dial that down to 3 frames per second, you can shoot until the card's full or until the battery runs out. The camera comes with a pleasing 20.36 million dot OLED viewfinder, which is a huge thing to have, as I believe this camera is intended to entice people with proper photography, not necessarily just shooting photos for Instagram. You won't find an EVF on comparable models, and it's nice to see the image through the viewfinder, and you can see the adjustments that you make on the camera settings change through the viewfinder, giving you a clue to what your exposure is going to look like prior to hitting the shutter release. Afterwards, you can preview the images on the bright LCD screen on the back of the camera, which is also a touch screen, which could be useful for selecting autofocus points. The camera's connectivity options, tilt screen, and abundance of film simulations and filters are intended to make sharing high quality photos to social media platforms easier. Fujifilm made a point about the APS-C sensor being 14 times larger than a smartphone sensor, indicating that there are still things you can do with a proper camera that you can't do with a smartphone, despite companies like Huawei, Samsung, Google, and Apple making leaps and bounds forward in terms of the camera quality on smartphones recently, and also using features like portrait mode to try and I suppose negate the necessity for a camera with a fast prime lens or something. I think one of the standout features on this camera and for cameras in this price bracket is the fact that you can get 430 shots out of the camera before it dies. You may even be able to get more depending on what settings you're using. It's just an approximate number. Comparable cameras in this price range will get almost half of that, and some of them don't even have an electronic viewfinder. My overall impressions of the camera are good. It feels good in hand. It's relatively dense. I'm not really sure where the weight's coming from, but it's a reassuring weight to have. I think I like the images that I got out of it, and Fujifilm's color science is very pleasing as always. Nice, vibrant, saturated colors. It's exactly what you want to see, and you have all the film simulation modes, which I enjoy using them because it reminds you of the analog days when you would have shot with some of those films on a rangefinder. This camera has some other unique features, some of which are sort of quirky social features. It has a selfie mode now, where if you pop the LCD out and you hold the camera like this to take a photo of yourself, you can actually set the number of faces that the camera recognizes, and when it hits that number of faces, so say I set it to 3, it goes all the way up to 4. If there's 2 faces in the frame and a third face pops up, it will then shoot the photo. It's kind of an interesting sort of feature. And it's also got 3 dials on top and then a little knob on the back here, sort of maintaining that Fujifilm X camera aesthetic. I find that to be really nice on this camera, just because it's nice. One of the things I've always enjoyed about Fujifilm cameras is having physical dials so that I can change the settings as I'm shooting without having to remove my face from the viewfinder and have to look at the back of the camera or fiddle around with the menu. So these 3 dials here and this one on the back are very useful. Yeah, and I think that's about it for the Fujifilm X-T100. If you're considering something like an A6000, an EPL9, a GX8, GX9, it's definitely something that you're going to want to look at. If you found this video informative and you'd like to see more Clifton Cameras content in the future, give us a like and hit the subscribe button. Bye.